Do you want to increase your score on the English section of the ACT? Welcome to my new series where I've compiled my resources that I've used over the years to tutor multiple students to help them increase their sub-scores on the English section of the ACT. Lesson 3, Look and Listen. As we go through a practice test, we will review some punctuation, parts of speech, when to use who or whom, and then we'll also touch on subject-verb agreement as well as pronoun antecedent agreement. As long as you know those things, you'll be able to answer these questions correctly. Question 1. Halloween was first celebrated among various Celtic tribes in Ireland in the 5th century BC. Among various is underlined. Choice A, no change. B, among varied. C, between the various. Or D, between various. Remember, you can substitute each answer choice for the underlined portion to listen for the correct answer. So, if we said Halloween was first celebrated among varied Celtic tribes in Ireland, or maybe C, Halloween was first celebrated between the various Celtic tribes in Ireland, or D, Halloween was first celebrated among various Celtic tribes in Ireland. Notice the difference between among and between. If you can distinguish which one of those is correct, then you can eliminate at least 50% of your answer. So when we look at the word between versus among, between usually means we are between maybe two. So there's probably more than just two Celtic tribes in the country of Ireland in the 5th century. So that can eliminate choice C and D. So that leaves us with choice A or B. So which one is best to say? Halloween was first celebrated among various Celtic tribes, or Halloween was first celebrated among varied Celtic tribes? Okay, so what word is different? Various versus varied. So which one of those would be correct to say? You said A, no change, you would be correct. It's correctly written as is. Okay, for question 2, we're going to get into a little bit of punctuation here. So look at the sentence. It traditionally took place on the official last day of summer, October 31st, comma, and was named All Hallows Eve. So let's go ahead and try to eliminate the obvious. So I want you to look at choice H. Okay, so choice H proposes that we put a period where that comma is in the sentence there, and then begin a new sentence with and. Now, we know that and was named All Hallows Eve is not a complete sentence. Therefore, we know that H is not the answer. All right, look at J for a second. We have a semicolon replacing that comma, and then and stays the same. Now, if we know how punctuation works and how a complete sentence works, we know that we should never be using that semicolon and the conjunction and, okay? So we can eliminate choice J and H. All right, so that leaves us down to F and G. So does it stay the same, or do we need to replace that comma with a dash? Okay, so what are the rules for dashes? So a dash is used to indicate an abrupt break in thought or to introduce an explanation. We usually use it when we're interjecting some extra additional information. It's not essential to completing a sentence. So look at this example. For our vacation, which was way too short, we went to the beach. Okay, so look at what's in between dashes, which was way too short. So those dashes are used to indicate we're kind of interrupting the flow of that sentence with just a little bit of extra information about that vacation. What about our vacation? Well, it was way too short. If we got rid of everything that's in between those dashes, the sentence would read, for our vacation, we went to the beach. And that's fine. That's a complete sentence. So anything that we want to add extra we can use a dash. So let's go back to that sentence. It traditionally took place on the official last day of summer. Notice that there is already a dash there after summer, October 31st. So yes, you would have to use a dash because you wouldn't use a dash and a comma. Think of these dashes like bookends, all right? If we have one, we need the other. And could I get rid of what's in between the dashes and the sentence would still make sense? Yes. It traditionally took place on the official last day of summer and was named All Hallows Eve. Yes, it makes sense. October 31st is simply some extra, information about the last day of summer because, maybe that's a different last day of summer for that time period or for that part of the world. So in order to add, that extra meaning there, maybe we need to clarify what their last day of the summer was. So the correct answer here is G, okay? So pay attention to when there's a dash. Just remember, they're like socks. You've got one on one foot, you got to have one on the other. Question 3. It was believed that all persons who had died during the previous year returned on this day to select persons or animals to inhabit for the next 12 months until they could pass peaceful into the afterlife. Now, I hope that just by reading that, you could tell that sounds a little bit off. So just by listening to it, and that's what we mean by look and listen, all right? The look rule applied to the dash, that you needed to notice. Well, here's the listen rule. So you should be able to discern just by listening that pass peaceful into the afterlife sounds a little wrong. Okay, so let's look at our verbs here. Pass, okay, in this sense means dying. So that is an action, so that is a verb. Peaceful. Okay, so the sense of it being peaceful is describing that verb. So let's review our parts of speech really quickly. So a verb again. Okay, so a verb expresses an action or a state of existence. An adverb describes or modifies, could be 3 things: a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. So look at these example sentences. The verbs are in red and the adverbs are in blue. She ran quickly through the field. So ran is the verb that shows the action. So how did she run? She ran quickly. Quickly describes her running. All right, notice how I can have that adverb right after the verb, or I could change it up on the next one. She quickly ran through the field. All right, here I've just switched the order. I've just put the adverb first and then the verb. It still modifies that verb. How did she run? She quickly ran. Now, not always, but many times, adverbs end in ly. So let's go back to our question. Until they could pass peaceful into the afterlife. Well, we know that A is not the answer. Until they could be passing peaceful. Again, that still has the same problem there. Peaceful. All right, remember adverbs a lot of times end in ly. We're going to zero in on B and C. We need that peacefully. They were looking to select persons to inhabit until they could pass how? Peacefully. Okay, so peacefully is found in choices B and C. So what's the difference between choice B and C? Well, look at B. The verb here is pass. And in C, passed, ed, until they could pass peacefully, or until they could pass peacefully. Okay, listen to that. The correct answer is B, until they could pass peacefully into the afterlife. Question 4. Look at what's underlined. Were dressing. So what should we use here? Should we use the Celts were dressing up? The Celts were dressed up? The Celts dressed up? Or the Celts are dressed up? So if you try to listen to that, they all really sound correct. So let me show you a quick way to answer this. So whenever you're faced with a question like this, I want you to look at the sentence as a whole. Right here, I want to draw your attention to and, which I've highlighted in red. Find the other verbs or verb phrases in that sentence. The ACT requires writing to be parallel. So if we have verbs in a sentence or in a passage, they really all need to match. They need to be parallel. So a very quick way to answer this type of question is to find the other verbs. Okay, look at this. What actions were the Celts doing? Look, the Celts were dressing up. The Celts, look what is after and. The Celts tried to make their homes. Okay. So I've bolded the next verb, tried to make. All right, notice how tried, it's ED, it's in the past tense. Do I have another helping verb before it? No. So I can eliminate choice F because if this were parallel, it would say the Celts were dressing up and trying to. Trying would have that ing to match that dressing ing. Well, that's why F is incorrect. All right, so look at G, were dressed. So if this were correct, then it would say and had tried. Well, I don't have that had in front of tried. So therefore, were dressed would not be parallel. So that's why G is not the answer. So I'm left with H and J. All right, so obviously, are dressed, okay, that would be in the present. The Celts are dressed and are trying? No. So we know that H, dressed, that simple one word, past tense, the Celts dressed up and tried. That is what is parallel, and that's what makes H the correct answer. Question 5, you should be able to answer quickly by listening. They tried to make their homes as coldest as possible. No, right away we know that that sounds incorrect. And tried to make their homes colder as possible. No. Tried to make their homes coldest as possible. No. They tried to make their homes as cold as possible. So very quickly we can pick out D as the correct answer. Question 6. Let's look at the underlined portion. It says, any villager whom was suspected of being possessed would be captured, after which they might be sacrificed in the bonfires, a warning sign to other spirits seeking to possess the living. So underlined, we have whom was. Our choices are whom were, who was, or J, who were. So the first thing we need to determine is, do we use who or do we use whom? So as a quick review, who versus whom. Who, in red, refers to the subject of a sentence or clause. So here's a quick check. If you can replace the word who with he, she, or they, then yes, you use who. Whom, with an M, refers to the object of a sentence or clause. It can be replaced with him, her, or them. So it would be correct to say, to whom should I give my ticket? Because whom is referring to the object. I'm giving this. Who's the object of the giving? Whom. All right, so again, who can tell me the name of the second president? So here's a really quick way that I use. So look at this slide. I have underlined the letter M. There is the letter M at the end of whom, and you can replace it with what again? Him or them. So just match up the M's. Okay, so let's go back to our question. Any villager whom was suspected, any villager who was suspected. All right, if you said who, you would be correct, and we've eliminated 50% of our choices. So now the next thing we need to determine is which verb should we use? Should we use was or were? Any villager who was, any villager who were. Okay, so that goes along with which of those verbs is singular and which one of those verbs is plural. So this goes back to another rule, subject-verb agreement. So if we have a singular subject, we need to use a singular verb. If we have a plural subject, we need to use a plural verb. So they need to match. You would want your socks to match or your shoes to match. So if I said he was tired, okay, he is one person. That is a singular subject. So I use the singular form of the verb in was. And notice how the singular verb ends in S. That's one of the ways I use to remember that. It would be incorrect for me to say he were tired. I could say they were tired, but I would never say he were tired. Okay? So again, here I have bolded the S. So use that to help you remember. S for singular. So S at the end of a verb means it is a singular verb. So let's go back to our question. Any villager. Okay, so any villager, does that mean all the villagers together, plural, or one villager, singular, at a time? So when we say any, we mean one at a time. So that would be a singular subject, any villager, one single villager at a time. So that means I need my singular verb, and the singular verb is going to end in S. So that means the answer is not J, but the answer is H. Any villager who was suspected. Question 7. They is underlined. They is a plural pronoun. Is it correct, or should we replace it with it, he, she, or those? The ACT is now testing your knowledge of pronoun antecedent agreement. The rule is very similar to subject-verb agreement. In order to determine agreement, I need to identify the antecedent for the pronoun they. Who is they referring back to? Look at the beginning of the sentence. Any villager. The antecedent is villager. To review this rule, remember that pronouns and antecedents, the words they refer back to, must match in terms of being singular or plural. Look at the incorrect sentence at the bottom. A student should clean up the mess they made. Without any clarifying context, I do not know if that one student is male or female. If I say they, I'm using a plural pronoun, but the antecedent is singular. A student, meaning one. That is why it is correct to say he or she. It means either one, but the point is that it is only one person, singular. Therefore, the correct answer to this question is C, he or she. The sentence now reads, any villager who was suspected of being possessed would be captured, after which he or she might be sacrificed in the bonfire. Question 8. The passage includes this sentence. In time, as belief in spirit possession waned, Halloween rituals lost their serious aspect and had been instead performed for amusement. Belief in, belief for, believing about, or belief of. Try to listen for one that sounds incorrect. Choice H is incorrect. Now we're left with belief in, belief for, or belief of. How do they differ? Choice G, belief for, has a meaning of being pro or anti, as if you're saying, are you pro spirit possession? No. The meaning here is whether one believes something exists or not. Try putting it in a different context. Did you believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy when you were a child? You wouldn't ask if someone believed of, you would ask if they believed in. Therefore, F, no change, is the correct answer. Question 9. Look at the underlined portion, had been. Should we replace it with having been, have been, or were? Remember what I said earlier about keeping our verbs and verb phrases parallel throughout a passage? Look for other words as verbs in this sentence. What did Halloween rituals do? They lost their serious aspect and had been instead performed for amusement. Now, if I'm using a one-word past tense verb, which of my answer choices is also a one-word past tense verb? Choice D, were. Question 10. This question is simply testing your knowledge of there, and there. Listening isn't going to help you here since all three words sound identical. You have to know which one to use correctly. For a quick review, use the one with I in it when showing possession. THERE refers to a place or idea. The one with the apostrophe is a contraction that is meant to be short for they are. So here's a tip. If you're ever unsure of whether to use the contraction, replace it with they are and see if the sentence still makes sense. Let's try that now. Irish immigrants fleeing from the potato famine in the 1840s brought they are Halloween customs to the United States. That doesn't make sense, so choice G is incorrect as well as F. No change since there, the one with I showing possession, is the one we need. We are talking about the customs belonging to the Irish immigrants, so the correct answer is H. Question 11. This question goes back to keeping verbs and verb phrases parallel. Some favorite pranks included unhinging front gates and overturning outhouses. Included is a past tense verb ending in ed. It is followed by unhinging, which ends in ing. Look at the entire sentence. The pranks included doing what to the front gates? Unhinging. Doing what to the outhouses? Overturning. Another ing verb. Only choices A and B use the ing form from there. We determine which is correct by looking at verb tense. Halloween became past tense. If we look at choice B, that is present tense. Therefore, the correct answer is A, no change. It is correctly written already. Question 12. This question tests your knowledge of when to use less or fewer. Since there were far less turnips in New England than in Ireland, the Irish immigrants were forced to settle for pumpkins. Here's the rule you need to know to ensure you'll answer correctly. Use fewer to describe countable items. Otherwise, use less. And here's a tip. In general, if the noun is plural, use fewer. If it is singular, use less. For example, fewer treadmills line the floor of the gym. Would you be able to count the treadmills in a gym? Yes. Also, treadmills is plural. There's more than one. Less equipment lines the floor of the gym. I'm not sure I'd be able to count that when equipment is used as the idea of one thing. But back to the question. What are we talking about? Turnips. Turnips, that's plural. Therefore, we should say there were far fewer turnips in New England than in Ireland. J is the correct answer. Question 13. This question addresses when to use an apostrophe or not with the word it's. The sentence says, Halloween has been a popular holiday ever since, although these days its principal celebrants are children rather than adults. Let's review this rule. Remember that using the apostrophe is an indication that the word represents a contraction meant to be short for it is. The word without the contraction indicates possession. It's going to be a beautiful day. Can you replace it with it is? It is going to be a beautiful day. Yes, therefore, we need the apostrophe. Here are two examples where we do not use the apostrophe. Milk has passed its expiration date. Would we say the milk has passed its expiration date? No. The dog lost its bone. Would we say the dog lost its bone? No. If we answer no, then we do not use the apostrophe. Let's try that on this ACT practice question. Halloween has been a popular holiday ever since Although it is principal celebrants are children rather than adults. No, we do not use an apostrophe here. That narrows down our choices to B and D. Which do you think is correct? If you said B, you answered correctly. Question 14. We're looking at the same sentence, but at a different underlined portion, rather than. If you substitute choice H or J, you find that the sentence no longer makes sense. Is it rather than with an A or rather than with an E? Choice F is correct. This sentence was correctly written as is. If you've made it to the end of this practice section, great job. We talked about lots of different rules this time. Keep them in mind the next time you take the ACT and watch your English score go up. Join me in the next lesson, but bye for now.